You're listening to Releasing Trauma, a survivor's podcast. And now here's your host, Tracy Osborne. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. I am so excited about today's guest. I've been reading her book, and y'all, you've got to get a copy of this book. It's called Penis Politics, a memoir of women, men, and power. And yes, I had to read it because of the title. The title was fantastic. And the book, it grabs you like from page one. I'm about halfway through it and I can't wait to finish. But my guest is Karen Hinton. She is a journalist and former press secretary to Andrew Cuomo, and also later to New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio. And the book, and what we're going to talk about today, is all about the just kind of the entitlement that men in power positions feel that they have, especially toward us as women. So, Karen, I am so excited. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. I love your slogan, "We all have a story to tell," because my book is nothing but about stories that I've experienced or I knew about from my women friends and my girlfriends in high school.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and let's talk about that. So, from your early days in high school, your friend Janice, she experienced, I think was probably all of your first bout experienced this power play with the coach who ended up, sexually assaulting her, raping her, essentially, and ruining her life, basically.
Mm-hmm.
How did you guys really handle that? I mean, this was back in the 70s. So this kind of thing wasn't talked about back then.
No, it was not. In the first part of Penis Politics is the sexual trauma that Janice faced. And it's she's the perfect story to tell for your show, because the trauma impacted not only her, but all of her friends close to her. There were three of us who were like a group where we hung out together all the time, kept secrets for each other, and depended on each other all the time. So it only didn't impact her, it impacted us as well. And so the book is almost about these inner thoughts that me, a 16-year-old girl, had at that time. And then I turned them into stories that are as accurate and fair as possible about the book's characters, Janice, Libby, Maggie, and me. But Janice really did suffer through so much, because after the rape in the book room by who was no longer a coach, but had been a coach and was a school official, she then changes the whole trajectory of her life. She was so smart, so kind, so beautiful, and could have done anything she ever wanted to do. But after that happened, she ended up dropping out of school, marrying someone a year older than she was, and moving away. He was in the Navy, and she goes to the military life. And it changed her trajectory after then, because she didn't go to college. And I always was waiting for her to go to college with me, right? I was so excited about the idea of it.
Right.
But that didn't happen. So talk about trauma. There was a lot of trauma in that.
Oh, no doubt. As teenagers, watched your friend go through this, and, probably, I'm assuming you just felt helpless because there wasn't really anything you could do. It was something that she had to go through, and process through on her own. But yet, you're watching her basically throw her life away.
Well, yeah. And at the time, none of us knew that was what was happening.
Right.
But all we wanted was to keep her with us. We didn't want her to run off with this guy who was joining the Navy. We wanted her to stay in high school, finish with us, go to college with us.
Mm-hmm.
Let's stay friends for the rest of our lives. And that changed. And, there may have been things that she did that she would have done anyway later in life. But at least she would have had that opportunity to meet other people away from her community, to go and college and learn a trade, and then decide what she wanted to do after that. But she never really had that opportunity. And that really, I think, disappointed her, as well as disappointing her friends,
Sure.
who loved her so much. And it was, for me, a lesson that I took with me as I then became a journalist after college and then was in politics. But it really was a lesson for me to take with me, because we didn't speak out.
Right.
We didn't tell a story. We kept a secret because she wanted us to. She did not want us to tell anyone about what had happened. And it was a secret. And now that I look back on it, I wonder, should we have said something to her parents, to the principal, or should we have really encouraged her to speak out, because we just did what she wanted us to do?
Right.
And so, it's something that I want to communicate through the book, is encourage women to speak out in some way, form, or fashion. It may just be tell a good friend, and it may just be tell someone who can stop what has happened, and it may just be file a claim, file a charge.
Right.
But we all have to really look at ourselves and figure out, how do we handle now what has happened? Because, as you know, sexual harassment, sexual abuse is so pervasive in not only the workplace, but in other parts of our lives.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. It's unfortunately it's everywhere. And I don't think any of us are immune to it. And I think at some point in our lives, I think most of us as women have experienced it at least once. I'll see things posted on social media like, how old were you the first time? And people will be saying, I was 4, I was 5, I was 6. So, from a very young age, so many have been exposed to this harassment and inappropriate behaviors and horrors. And I don't get how these men can really think that it's okay. I mean, especially as they get into positions of power, excuse me, as they get into these positions of power, it almost makes it worse because they feel invincible, and, nobody's going to tell on them because of who they are, and they'll get away with it. I mean, look at Larry Nassar.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And the reason I decided to call my book Penis Politics is because I wanted a shocking title. And I thought Penis Politics would give me that.
You did.
Right. Because I also know at the same time that Penis Politics is about conduct, much more shocking than the official name of a body part.
Yes.
Right. So when you ask the question, what do you mean when you called your book Penis Politics, for goodness sakes? What does that mean? Well, it's about discrimination, harassment, abuse, misogyny, and in some states, it's illegal. And I wanted to come up with a shocking name to something women struggle with and live with. And it can be small, everyday harassments, as well as abuses that leads to violence and rape. And it's a spectrum, and we need to keep all of that in mind. And we shouldn't take anything away from the small, everyday abusements and harassments. Obviously, we're opposed to violence and rape, but we also need to be opposed to that discrimination, that flirtatious, touchy behavior that we find often in the workplace that is inappropriate, and especially in politics, what you just referred to.
Right.
Politics, penis politics and campaigns in government is like the wild, wild west these days. I mean, every day we hear something about an elected official treating a woman inappropriately. And I think part of that comes from the whole culture of campaigns where everyone works 24/7 around the clock, even for a short period of time during a campaign. And they compete with each other, and they also compete with the opponent's staff, obviously, but there simply are no rules. They don't have any rules in those kinds of situations. And then let's say the candidate wins and they go on to an elected office, it just continues. It doesn't stop. They feel like they're in a constant campaign all the time. I mean, think about what happened to Alexandria, and I may be mispronouncing her name, Ocasio-Cortez. We always call her AOC in New York, so I have lost the ability to pronounce her middle name. But, you know, a congressman drew a cartoon depicting her being murdered for the public to see. I mean, that is just unbelievable that he was allowed to get away with that and remain in the Republican Party. So that's a long story to say, you know, that penis politics is something that men and women need to acknowledge and deal with in the workplace, but also at home and in sports, and in the entertainment industry, but also, you know, in jobs that don't pay as much as being a celebrity, but, you know, at the grocery store, at, you know, restaurants and other places where women really struggle with these problems all the time.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. And it's just browbeaten into us not to say anything.
Right.
And that comes from, you know, years and centuries of victim blaming and, you know, not believing us and, you know, women are nothing and all of that. And we've come a long way, but we still have so far to go.
Yes.
You know, the Me Too movement back in 2018, that was huge.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, now it's kind of quieted down a little bit. And, you know, and I think it woke some people up, at least for a short time, you know, but I just don't see the big changes that I was hoping we would see from that.
Yes, I agree. And that's why I just said that men and women need to acknowledge the problems behind this and see that it does impact women. And I think some women think, oh, I can deal with this. It's no big deal. I'm just going to wave it off and not pay any attention.
I did that.
Right. And some women even say, I don't know why she's so upset about this man, you know, giving her a hug and a kiss and a pat on the butt. You know, that's no big deal to me. Well, maybe it's not to her, but it could be to other women. And we need to understand that dynamic and understand the impact it has on the woman, not just when it happens, but then dealing with it every day at work. If a male colleague is sexually harassing a woman in that way. And so we just have to be conscious of it and acknowledge it and accept it and not try to just wave it away like it's no big deal. I've seen that with the Cuomo problem, the sexual scandal that he's gone through, where women have gotten on Twitter and Facebook and online on websites to criticize. And as you said, shame, slut shame. I'm sorry, slut shame the women by saying all kinds of crazy things about them. And for a woman to say that about another woman, I just think we need to pull that back in. And if there is some investigation underway or some claim made, then let's see how it plays out in a court of law or in some investigation. But don't just assume the woman is lying. I mean, let's take her word, and then somebody should deal with it and see what needs to happen.
Absolutely. It's not going to change until we make the change. And, by us sticking together and, banding together, that's going to make us feel stronger. These women, yourself included, who come out, especially against these powerful guys, coming out against someone like Andrew Cuomo, and then you have to face that backlash of the hatred and the hate mail and the death threats or, whatever. It's crazy. And this is why people don't come forward. And until we can stop that and make people realize, it's not okay. Sure, it was a simple pat on the butt or, whatever. It's not okay. It's my body. And he has no business touching my body without my permission. And for that matter, women too, women in power do the same thing. It's just not as prevalent and not as heard of because men are even more ashamed, I think, and reluctant to speak out about sexual harassment.
Yes. And I think in politics, because more women have been elected as governors and members of Congress and state officials as well, not that it's a vast majority, it's not, it's still very small in number, but in part, after the Me Too really started up, more women have been running for office and they're getting elected. And that helps, I think, immensely, because as I know in New York, there's so many state senators and state assembly women who have spoken out on behalf of women's rights and ending sexual harassment. And they stepped up first to call on Andrew Cuomo to resign after the women, the 11 women or so, spoke up about their experiences. And I decided to talk about publicly, to talk about what happened with myself and Andrew Cuomo way back in 2000, because I had been working for him at the Department of Housing and Urban Development. This was before he became governor, when he was secretary of HUD. And I had finished my book by the time Lindsay Boylan and Charlotte Bennett and others began to speak out about Andrew Cuomo. I had finished my book, and it was about this very topic. And I had written a few pages about what happened to me. But I thought, well, I don't want to talk about it right now. Let me wait till the book is published and then it comes in some context. But when I heard Charlotte Bennett speak on CBS about what happened to her, I was convinced I needed to speak out immediately because I thought it would help affirm what she was saying. Because as you know, in sexual harassment and abuse, it's always helpful to show the pattern of harassment and the pattern of abuse. It just didn't happen once. It happened several times over time and continues to happen even with two other women. So it's good to show, it's important, it's not good, it's important to show the pattern so that the public, as well as the investigators, will see that this just didn't happen accidentally one day when he crossed the line, but it was a series of events that led to his decision to resign and had also led to the state legislature being ready to impeach him, which is why he resigned.
Right. And not only is it important to show that pattern, but it's important to show the victims who are still silent, maybe not even, with him, but with other people, that it's okay to speak out. And it's
Right.
important to speak out, because if you don't, it's just going to keep happening to somebody else.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And I know I withheld the information primarily because I thought it would hurt me if I talked about it, that it would hurt my career. It would hurt my relationship that I had with not only him, but also with other people who worked for him. And I was in politics. That was my life. That's my career. And so, but once I heard Charlotte Bennett's story, I mean, it really broke my heart in so many ways. And I just decided that my truth from the past would help strengthen the truth in the present. And so that's why I decided to talk about it before the book came out, Penis Politics. But I do think the book puts these kinds of small harassments, small abuses. When I say small, I mean something like touching the butt or giving a woman a kiss on the lips when it's not asked for, to, something that happened to my high school friend, Janice, when she was raped in the book room. So I wanted to show that sort of that spectrum of things that can happen and the consequences of it.
Absolutely. It's not just a one-time thing. It has consequences, and it's a ripple. It's like tossing a pebble into the lake, and it ripples out. It doesn't just plop and nothing happens. There is a big effect for any type of indiscretion or inappropriateness, violence, all of that. No matter how I don't want to say how big and how small, but that's kind of what I'm kind of going for there. But because it affects, like you said before, and like you said in the book, it doesn't just affect one person. It affects so many people. It affects their relationships, their friendships, their future. So absolutely. The importance of being able to speak out, and being able to speak out without repercussion is what we really need to start working towards.
No, exactly. That is so important, so that if a woman speaks out, she's not then unable to find another job, or unable to have friendships, or unable to pursue a career that she wants. And I've seen that happen to women, and I know the consequences of it. So just like with Janice, but also with women that I worked with and became good friends with on Capitol Hill, who found themselves in situations where, okay, I want to get this job. If I go have a drink with Congressman X, then that will help me get the job. I know that because I've basically been told, go have a drink with them, and you don't have to sleep with them, but just, let him know that you like him, and things will go from there. And that was very common on Capitol Hill. And it was always a struggle to decide whether or not to do that. And some women would, and some women wouldn't. And 9 times out of 10, the woman who tried to be a tad flirtatious often got the job.
Sure.
And then a lot of times you were competing for jobs that weren't as important as the ones that men had. Because back then, when I was on Capitol Hill, this was in the 80s, all the chief of staffs were men, and the receptionists were women. And then there's all those in-between positions that women were competing for in the workplace. And how do you get them? Well, you need to figure out how to be nice to the boss. And the boss was either the chief of staff or the congressperson, or the congressman in most cases. But, so that really is the thing that we have to acknowledge and say, okay, we're going to stop that kind of behavior.
Absolutely. And it's not just in politics, it's in so many industries. I mean, look at, Hollywood, the casting couch, in big business, you hear of women who have risen to the top and are accused of sleeping their way to the top, and instead of being recognized for their accomplishments, they're put down and bashed and slandered. And, it's got to stop. I don't know how to make it stop. I just, it's such a big problem. It makes me feel like just one tiny person in trying to take on a big problem.
Right.
And that's it. That's the solution right there. Is we have to do it together.
Exactly. We have to do it together. And it can't just be because of a district attorney investigation or an attorney general investigation or police department investigation. Mm-hmm. That's important. And if you want to make a claim and you want to make a charge, that's important. At the same time, we also can help women by letting men know in the workplace that it is just not appropriate. Sorry, that's in the past. I know you have done it, and maybe your father did it, and maybe the male mentors that you have, but it's those days are over. So give it up. You're not going to be able to flirt and kiss on a woman and touch a woman inappropriately. You're not going to do it. So, and just live with that and know that that's the best thing for the company. It's the best thing for the employees to operate in that kind of environment. Then the competition is fair and balanced.
Mm-hmm. And I think, the more we speak out, especially against these power players, the more we are going to open everybody's eyes to the fact that, yes, this is still happening in 2022. And it's not okay. We're done with it. We're tired of it. We're not going to take it anymore. And we're not going to stay silent.
Yes, exactly. That's right. And I'll just quickly tell you a story about why I decided to write the book.
Yeah.
At 57, I suffered a severe traumatic brain injury. And after the injury, I was having trouble speaking, and I still do sometimes. I'm getting better, but where I couldn't remember a word or get a sentence out exactly the way I wanted it. And I'll listen to this interview later and I'll say, oh, why didn't I say it this way? Because I'm still struggling with it. But reading and writing was a big problem. And so I slowly began that process of remembering and setting down my memories on paper, which really helped me recover from the brain injury. And if I hadn't had the brain injury, I would have never written the book, because I suddenly had time to sit and think about my life and where I wanted to go, because the injury was changing the dynamics of my life. And I started reading these old diaries from high school that I had kept, and I'd forgotten about them. But I started reading them and laughing and crying and wondering, why was I saying that back in 1975, 74? And then all those thoughts about Janice and Maggie and Libby and other girls who I knew flooded back. And that was a really great way for me to recover. So I say that because I think when a woman goes through a sexual trauma of any nature, it's good just to sit back and think about yourself and what you want and how you want to deal with the problem. And then if you have women friends, call them, go see them, and talk about it and get their input into what you should do. because I do think women bonding together helps each other figure out how to handle a traumatic event, whether it's a brain injury or, a sexual trauma that involves something that happens in the workplace or something that happens at home or something that happens in sports. And sports is a real big problem, as is the entertainment industry. So, I just think that is so important. Looking back at your past and thinking about, okay, what do I want to do differently? How do I want to proceed? And getting input from other women as well as some men if you trust them and value their opinion.
Absolutely. I agree. We can't change the past, but we can learn from the past and we can change the future, and we can definitely change who we are and how we are in the present, for sure. So, well, Karen, thank you so much for coming on. This has been fantastic. Listeners, again, go get a copy of the book, Penis Politics. I will have all of the information in the show notes. Just go to releasingtraumapodcast.com and pull up Karen's episode. All the links and everything will be there for you. It is a fantastic book. Just a great read. Very well written.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I am not a political person by any stretch of the imagination. And so I was a little nervous about it, but it's not a political book. It really isn't. It's just a fantastic book. So
right. You will see your story in my story.
Yep.
Right. Because we all relate, whether no matter politics or not. So that's something I wanted to try to accomplish. So that's great to hear. And you can buy it on Amazon. Pretty easy to do. So I hope your listeners will buy it too.
Awesome. Well, again, Karen, thank you so much for coming on. And listeners, as always, thank you for tuning in. We'll talk to you in the next show. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure you hit subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss a show. Be sure to check us out on our new socials on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.